What is going on, YouTube? What is going on, Kansas City? And what is going on, everybody? And welcome to the Beat of KC. Ladies and gentlemen, I have Jesse Newell on to talk about KU athletics, specifically KU basketball and also KU football. This is a very, very exciting, honestly, for me, an exciting interview. Jesse, what is going on, my friend?
Not too much. Obviously, ramping up for the seasons that are to come, and different sorts of optimism for the two teams, for football and basketball, obviously in different ways.
That's what's up. I know you're definitely busy, obviously, with that kicking in gear. So again, I appreciate you taking time and giving it, to the people over at the beat. Before we start jumping into the questions, if you don't mind, just letting everybody know where they can find you on social media and where they can check you out over at the Kansas City Star.
Yeah, Jesse Newell on Twitter. That's the easiest way to kind of keep in touch with the stuff that we're writing and that we're reporting on. And then, yeah, kansascity.com is the KC Star. And if people need a nice special code to get the sports pass, that's the place to get it, is from me, either on Twitter or just through email. $30 for the year for the first year. That gets you 12 months of the sports coverage. And we did the math. I'm a math guy, so I think it's 8.5 cents per day, 9 cents per day, something like that. And we hope that we bring that to you, that it's worth it in the end for that. I think hopefully if I'm taking the 8 pennies from you and we're not making you broke with that. But yeah, that's the two places you can get us. And like I said, all the extensive sports coverage from myself, Gary Bedore on the KU Beat too, and then the awesome columnist, Royals coverage, Chiefs coverage, all that stuff you can handle.
Awesome. Well, Jesse, I'm ready to dive in, start asking you some questions. So you did graduate from KU, correct?
That's right.
Just wanted,
Way back in the day, yeah.
yeah. Well, can you, if you don't mind, what year did you graduate?
I graduated from KU in '06.
Oh six. Okay, because that leads me into this question. So clearly, you've obviously graduated from KU, and you've been covering them for a period of time now. Which has been your favorite or your Kansas basketball team to cover, really from kind of beat reporting?
Yeah, it's a good question. So out of school, I started working at the Emporia Gazette for a couple years, but then right after that came back and worked at the Lawrence Journal World. So I've been on the KU beat ever since 0809, which was right after, as everybody knows, the Orange Bowl and the national title. So didn't get to cover those, but covered everything immediately after that in some form or fashion. Um, you know, I would probably say basketball wise, the 18 team stands out.
Yeah.
Those guys really seem to like each other. You can YouTube it, I'm sure, but there's like a nice little 3-minute compilation of really funny clips from that year from Malik Newman and Svi Mikhailuk and Devontae Graham, just sort of giving each other crap throughout the course of the entire season and talking about donut sticks and people stealing snacks, Scooby snacks from each other. But I think that it really showed their personalities, and those guys were fun to cover. Devontae was always, Bill Self always talked about him being kind of the big man on campus, and
Yeah.
the one that everybody is sort of drawn to naturally because of his personality. But he was like that to cover as a beat reporter as well. Malik Newman was a great personality. Svi Mikhailuk will get in his own quips and things like that, and genuinely was a nice guy, a nice person to cover on the beat. It was so funny with Gary Bedore, my colleague. He's been covering KU forever, but Steve would always go up to Gary, how's it going, Gary? And just, I mean, it's the funniest thing, just always would seem to want to say things to Gary on the way in and out of press conferences. But that team just had a lot of personality, a lot of life to it. And,
Yeah.
and thinking back, I guess I'm kind of, the mind is drawn to the winners here, I guess, but 2012 had some of those similarities too. And Tyshawn Taylor, personality wise, leadership wise, he's one of the
Yeah.
favorite people I've had to cover on any beat of any time. The guy just got it when it came to media. I mean, he understood that he was a team leader. He understood when he needed to say something, and then he could be funny. He'd crack jokes. He was just such a huge personality, and obviously had an up and down time at Kansas with some of the turnovers he had and fans liking him and not liking him, but was a great guy to cover in the time. And, Jeff Withey had a good story in him as well. I remember writing a feature about him. So those two teams really stand out as kind of the ones that immediately popped in mind. But I think part of that is just based off of the people you cover and the personalities that are there. And I think Devontae Graham and Tyson Taylor immediately rise to the top of that list.
For sure. That's awesome. That's growing up, that's something, I've always listened to KU basketball, on the radio. And you got Al Davis calling it, and then, or Bob Davis, excuse me, Bob Davis. And then now you got Brian Haney. And I mean, just the voices coming through the radio and making it come to life makes you even really that much more passionate about KU basketball. And, it's something that I've always just enjoyed, and so that's kind of the question that I have for you next. With that being said, you're covering something that a lot of people in Kansas City, the state of Kansas, obviously, are very passionate about is basketball. How do you feel about covering, this, I guess, extreme excitement that people have for basketball? Is it, do you get a lot of attention because you cover them? Can you kind of just talk a little bit about what it's like to cover KU basketball?
Well, it can be crazy. It's how you want it, honestly, because people are passionate and they care. And I think all of us, just at a human level, you want to do something that people care about.
Yeah.
People want to read, and the worst thing out there is just basically if you're doing something or writing something or a part of something that just doesn't really resonate that much or doesn't have an impact when you do it. So it's good and bad, obviously.
Yeah.
Part of the game is to be on Twitter all the time and to search breaking news and make sure you're not missing anything, and then interact with people that honestly don't have as much skin in the game sometimes as you do, and say some things that probably they wouldn't say in person. But listen, it goes both ways. Sometimes I do the same thing. So
Yeah.
you try to really limit yourself on there, and try to take deep breaths. And I'm trying to get really good at not only muting people, but also learning that you don't have to reply to every comment. You can let somebody have the last word every once in a while. But overall, I think it's sort of a place that is well read. I mean, it's there's no doubt that people are interested in it 365 days a year. I mean, again, I keep referring back to Gary, but Gary pumps out KU basketball stories. I mean, he basically pumps out one a day for the
Yeah.
course of the entire year. And you know why he does that? Because there's a market for it. Because people always want to know about recruiting. They always want to know about the past athletes. They want to know about the guys that are in camp this summer and the newcomers that are coming in, and potentially what's going to happen in the future. So it's fun to do. It's fun to cover. And obviously me having an AP poll vote adds kind of another layer on top of that, because you also get other fan bases coming to talk to you about how smart or not smart you are as well. But it's what you want. It's what you want to have happen. If you're putting your work out to the world, you want people to react to it and be happy or angry or emotional or upset, and maybe not upset, but like you want them to react to something you write and at least think. And I think that the KU beat definitely lends itself to that.
That's awesome. That's awesome. Well, that's super exciting, man. Because I like to just hear that side of it, because most people read your articles and then they base their judgments and things like that. But it's nice to just hear your opinion, at least on the excitement that you have, at least writing the content. And I think that's awesome. Now that leads me to kind of this next piece, because this is something to write about. Abaji's returning. Obviously, we're getting Wilson. Remy Martin's deciding to come to KU. That in itself just is super, super exciting. I did see you have a tweet where you said basically Bill Self is going to have two NCAA tournament teams. I think that's extremely exciting. Can you just kind of break that down? Just when you were writing that tweet, what you were really like, what does that mean?
Yeah, it's fascinating. So one of the sites I like to use is Bart Torvik's site, and he has this great sort of roster manipulator that he has on there, where you can sort of see what a team would look like or where they would rank if you subtract players off the roster. And I was actually messaging with him yesterday a little bit about this, but with his tool. So when I was doing this, KU was fifth in his basically his preseason poll rankings as it stood yesterday. If you took Remy Martin, Jalen Wilson, Christian Brown, Ochai Agbaji, and Jalen Coleman Lands off of KU's roster, they still rank 23rd nationally. So it's not too much of a stretch to say if you took two other players off of that and made them their own team, and then took the other seven players and made them their own team, both of those teams would make the NCAA tournament. So the one caveat I will say is that basketball can kind of be cruel in this way, in that if Bill Self was the head coach at a football at Alabama, this would be amazing for Kansas, because if you have a great fourth string receiver, you can get them in the game. You can
Yeah.
play them on special teams. You can rep them in. You can rotate. There's lots of plays available. And basically, when you add to your depth, you continue to add to the strength of your team. And basketball doesn't always work like that. I mean, the fact that KU has really good players from 10 to 14 in their rotation is probably not going to mean much at the end of the season, because players 10 through 14 are most likely not going to play, and they're
Yeah.
not going to play minutes. So while this is really good for Kansas to have now, and it's really good for fans to look at and be excited about and say, hey, what is Bill Self going to do with this roster? There's a million things you could talk about. I don't know that it's necessarily as good as it could be if you were playing a sport like baseball or football, where if you just continue to add to the depth, it really helps the rest of your roster and overall when you're playing a game. But, you know, the reason that Kansas can be top 5 preseason in every poll out there this year is because of the players we mentioned, and because those guys are high-end talents to start with. You know, you start with a Remy Martin, who's 2-time all Pac-12 first team. You bring back 4 starters: Wilson, Brown, Abaji, and then McCormick. And then, you know, Bill Self just brought in 8 new players this offseason, figured that after the USC game, he needed to shake things up, and he certainly did that. So you've got a Joseph Yesufu from Drake, who's a potential scorer. Jalen Coleman-Lands is a 3-point shooter from Iowa State. Juwan Harris is a backup point guard. Mitch Leifwitz played a bunch of minutes. And then, oh, by the way, they have 24/7 Sports Composites #1 recruiting class in the Big 12 to go with it. So a lot of options for Bill Self. But like I said, I mean, I think the strength of this team is the top. I don't know that necessarily the very end of the roster is going to make them all that good, more of a talking point early in the season than it is a strength. But adding Remy Martin and getting Ochai Abaji back and getting Jalen Wilson back, it certainly makes this team one that is going to be feared coming into the season, and one that should be the favorite to win the Big 12 once again.
For sure. You know, and I think that, you know, after looking back, Bill Self, you know, definitely you could sense that he was like, I need to make some moves. And I think that he really did a good job with the team he had last year. I mean, and at least got them to where they could, but you could just kind of sense it going in that something was going to change. I don't know if a lot of people, maybe you did, or and some other people projected it, but I couldn't imagine him just revamping the entire program the way he did. One of the players that I'm excited about that I feel is kind of starting to get shadowed just because Remy Martin's coming there and some of these other players is Cam Martin. You know, what are your thoughts on Cam? Do you think he's going to get a decent amount of minutes as a big guy that can kind of shoot it from the 3-point line? Or do you think he's going to be kind of more of a role player coming in? Obviously, you know, you got some other big guys. You mentioned Lightfoot. You know, what do you think the role is going to be for Cam Martin?
Yeah, it's a good question. I think before I do that, you sort of have to take a step back, because I hear a lot of people out there just basically say, oh, well, there's going to be enough minutes to go around. They'll just compete for them.
Yeah.
And I actually tweeted this yesterday too. If you just give Remy Martin, Jalen Wilson, Christian Brown, David McCormick, Ochai Abaji the same minutes they had last year, you're left with 50 minutes per game for all 9 of the rest of the scholarship players. So you're at a point. I just mentioned Jalen Coleman-Lands started for his last 2 teams.
Yeah.
Joseph Yesufu averaged 23 points in his last 9 games for Drake, including, you know, big games in the NCAA tournament. Mitch Leifwitz played for Kansas. Juwan Harris was the backup point guard for Kansas last year. All these freshmen that, again, make up the #1 recruiting class in the Big 12, that's a lot of people to have to split up 50 minutes. So I guess before I talk about Cam Martin, I think it's important to understand that reality right now. And listen, you can argue, you can say, hey, maybe Christian Brown will get fewer minutes. But, I mean, Dave McCormick had 23 minutes a game last year. And I would probably bet the over for him. You know, Are you not going to give Remy Martin 34 minutes? Are you not going to give Ochai Abaji 33 minutes? Jalen Wilson was 28. I mean, is that number going to go down? So, I mean, these things seem to balance out. And I just don't think maybe there's, instead of 50 minutes, maybe there's 55 minutes available. Maybe there's 60 minits available. But if this plays out like a true Bill Self team or a typical Bill Self team, it's not many minutes to split between these guys. So having said that, Cam Martin, it sort of gives Bill Self a weapon he hasn't had very often. And that's that stretch 5 big man to be able to shoot threes. And I talked to Cam about a week ago when he was at Brett Ballard's camp in Washburn, just sort of interested in what he would say. And he talked about in practice, and I guess it's not practice, it's early workouts that they have done for the campers. But Bill Self had basically told him, hey, if you're in there, you got to shoot. You got to shoot threes because that's basically what you're brought to Kansas to do. And so that's just different. That's different from what Bill Self has sort of ever done with one of those big men. Because you remember, even like before last year, he talked about how Mitch Lightfoot had shot a bunch of threes in practice and looked pretty good doing it. And okay, maybe him and David McCormick are going to shoot a bunch of threes throughout the course of last season. It didn't happen. It basically never happens for Bill Self.
Yeah.
So this is a little bit different though, because Cam Martin, that's what he does. If you're going to play him, you're playing him to be a stretch five and to step out and shoot those threes. So defensively, I don't know. I mean, that's going to be a big question mark for him. What position is he going to guard? Is he going to be able to at least hold his own enough to make up for it on the offensive end? But it's a fascinating storyline within a storyline because, like I said, this is a Bill Self player that he's never had before, and more sort of looking more toward the future of basketball and what's going to become in the NBA rather than sort of what Bill Self has had in the past when he looked at his big men and kind of played them a certain way.
For sure. And I think that's what's going to be absolutely epic is to see Cam shooting threes, but then being able to just go in and shake the rim like, David McCormick would, or somebody of that stature. And that's what I'm looking forward to. I was always a big time. I mean, my favorite player was Thomas Robinson. Thomas Robinson had some of the most epic dunks, but one of the biggest plays in history when he blocked that shot at Mizzou, or at home against Mizzou. So Thomas Robinson was by far one of my favorite players. And I think that kind of translates a little bit to what we might see with Cam, except he's going to be shooting that 3-point ball, which is just a little bit different. I'm super excited about it. And that kind of leads me to this next one, a little bit touching on Missouri. I've been joking that the reason why we went out and loaded up the way we did is because we're actually going to be having Mizzou come to Allen Fieldhouse this year. So we got to be prepared to absolutely just annihilate them. They are coming to Allen Fieldhouse at December 11th. How exciting is that again to just have the border war back, in basketball? I remember growing up as a kid, going to school, I was like one of the only KU fans. And then I would always get heckled if we lost and vice versa. How exciting is that just to be able to cover that again from your point of view?
Yeah, you can understand the reasons that it stopped, but for everybody's sake, it's great that it's happening again now. I mean, rivalries are what makes sports. These are the games that make things fun. It makes it great to cover. It makes it great to show up. It makes a great atmosphere. You talked about the Thomas Robinson block, and I've been covering games a long time. I don't think I'll ever feel a burst of sound. I remember sitting on the baseline and I felt the burst of sound after he blocked that shot, just because I've never listen. I don't feel how it shakes sometimes. It gets super loud in there sometimes, but in that moment when it looked like the game was lost and then Thomas Robinson recovered to block it, I had never felt noise like that before at Allen Fieldhouse. I probably won't experience something like that ever again. So that's the sort of thing that it brings, though. And fortunately, unfortunately for the rivalry, this doesn't look like it's going to be a very competitive game at Allen Fieldhouse next year. Now, everybody will be amped up, and KU will be excited to play it. Missouri will be excited to play it. The Brown family will be excited. Obviously, Christian has made some comments already about how he really wants to take on the Tigers, all those sorts of things. But this is what's fun, and this is what sports are about. And I think so much of what you try to get back to when you're writing or analyzing is trying to have that mindset of the things that people enjoy, like what about the sport is something that people enjoy, and this sort of thing. I mean, you talk about the sports radio, it'll be buzzing that week, the newspaper. Well, I'm sure we'll be writing a bunch of stories about it and people will be yapping back and forth. And it'll be the first time in almost 10 years that the two teams will have played again. So I'm glad it's back. I think it'll be an amazing atmosphere at Allen Fieldhouse. I think everybody will be ready for it. And obviously nobody wanted to sit out 9 years, but the fact that it did sit out 9 years, it's going to make this one seem a whole lot more important.
For sure. And, I think as we continue, it's going to obviously evolve into football, and we're going to see it in many other ways. But I think it's just exciting that rivalry's back. And like you said, it's been way too long, in my opinion. Now, this kind of leads me into a potential, I would say, a blue blood rivalry. So KU and Kentucky are neck and neck when it comes to, being the winningest basketball program in NCAA history. Kentucky's currently up by 4, and they're going to be coming to Allen Fieldhouse on January 29th. Can you just kind of talk about the magnitude of that game? I mean, just kind of leading into that, I think that personally, that's a big game just because, again, it's a blue blood basketball program going against another one. but you're talking about becoming the winningest basketball program, and that's also going to have contention later on. I'm sure there's a chance that they're going to, if they're good, they're going to make the tournament. So, what are your thoughts on really just that entire aspect, just the winningest basketball program, the competition, and them coming to Allen Fieldhouse?
Yeah, you want to talk about things that fans are interested in. I mean, that is very much at the top of the list and having those bragging rights. Kentucky's had that for a long time now, and it really hasn't been that close. And Bill Self has absolutely narrowed the gap. What's so fascinating about this one is if KU does further close the gap and that game potentially, ties it or puts KU ahead, the hype for that will be unbelievable. What's sort of funny is that it's not a finish line, though. You know what I
Yeah,
mean? The
yeah,
whole potential could be that KU could have all this hype, go into it, win the game, and then like lose two of the next three, and Kentucky could just jump right back ahead. It's only a one game sample, a one head to head thing. But listen, those are great, and you see Bill Self on the sideline. Uh, he has a ridiculous record in these top five type event games. I mean, he has a ridiculous record against the Krzyzewskis, Caliparis, Izzos of the world. And you see him on the sideline, you hear him in the post game, and it doesn't, he makes it pretty clear. I mean, he gets amped up for those contests. And
yeah.
you add that it's at Allen Fieldhouse and that the fans will absolutely be ready for that. And kind of you put it in the middle of conference play like it's been for the Big 12 SEC Challenge for a while now, and you get a little bit of a freshness feel to it when you've been dragging in the Big 12 for a while, then that'll be, I mean, KU schedule's loaded this year. And it was funny to me. I saw some discussion or somebody was talking to me about, well, KU doesn't really have the quality of home games in the non-conference this year that they normally have. And it's just like, guys, they're playing at Colorado. They're playing in the Champions Classic. They're playing in Orlando in a loaded field. They're going back to New York to play at St. John's. Then they have Kentucky at home. They've also got the Missouri game. I mean, it's amazing. Like if you go look at, and I'm not saying there's anything wrong with this because coaches can scheme and figure out what's best for their particular programs. And a Texas Tech and a Baylor, those schools play basically nobody in the non-con. They try to get a bunch of players on rotation. They try to figure out their teams, and it works for them. Again, Texas Tech went to the national title game about 3 years ago, and Baylor won the whole thing last year. So it's not a negative. I'm just saying, like it's amazing that Bill Self just loads his schedule up. So when there's even like a tick back of every non-conference game isn't a potential conference winner, then it seems like there's disappointment when really KU is sort of the outlier here with the schedule they play and really go against teams that are good every single season. So that'll be one of the good ones. It's an amazing slate. I mean, at Colorado, Tad Boyle, half of Western Kansas showing up in Boulder. I mean, that game is great. You add in the altitude. I mean, that's one to look forward to. Those Orlando games, you play 2 in a row, skip a day. It's over Thanksgiving. It's at Disney World. I mean, that's amazing. 2 games in New York. One's in the Champions Classic. I mean, nothing, basically nothing. I mean, Maui does top it, but almost nothing tops Madison Square Garden. And when you play there, the celebrities show up. I mean, you got like Spike Lee courtside and NBA players showing up on their day off. I mean, this is fun. This is going to be fun for Kansas. And there's a lot of these games out there that should bring people back to life after, obviously it was a bummer to have Kansas not be in the NCAA tournament when they could have won the whole thing. And it was a bummer last year when Allen Fieldhouse was mostly not full and it didn't feel like itself. So it's coming back with a vengeance this year with all these games and all these fun atmospheres. So Kansas having a loaded up team should increase the experience as well when they go and face these very difficult games.
I think that's going to be interesting too, because not only is it going to be revigorating for the fans that come back, because like you said, Allen Fieldhouse didn't have the fans last year, but now the players that are there are going to be able to experience why Allen Fieldhouse is such a special place to play. And some of those guys that came in and played and then transferred, would they even have got to experience what Allen Fieldhouse is at a full capacity? I mean, I tried to think about that. Like, there was probably a few guys that last year was their freshman year, and I was trying to think, who was it? Bryce Thompson, maybe, that would not have got to experience that.
Bryce Thompson, Tyon Grant Foster as well.
Yeah, so a few of those guys didn't even get to really, they come for the visits and they get to see that environment, but they didn't get to play in that environment. I think that's unfortunate, but it is what it is. That's just a pandemic, and it was unfortunate circumstances. But that kind of leads me to a question. I heard you kind of talk about it a little bit on 810. So I kind of wanted to readdress it, but maybe propose it just a little bit different. Um, so we are seeing the NCAA pass that approval where athletes can get endorsements and can get paid in some facets. Um, I kind of wanted to propose some of these guys that Bill Self had gotten a little while back where we'd expect them to at least be around for 4 years. Do you think that creates a little bit more of a reason to stay in school for some of these players where maybe they could go play overseas or maybe they could go do this, but instead, because they're getting endorsements and they're able to stay in school, get their degree, and then go do whatever? Do you think that kind of creates a little bit more of a want to, I guess, stay at a KU or even like a Duke or North Carolina or somewhere like that? Um, because I just think like some of these players leave early because they're like, I want to go to the draft. I do want to make some money. But now that that's an available option, do you expect players, I guess, to stay a little bit longer and maybe look to continue to get their education?
Well, yeah, I mean, I think absolutely that's going to play a factor, and we haven't gotten to talk to him in a press conference setting yet, but
Yeah.
I'd be interested to hear from Ochai Abaji. The guy, if you were going to draw up the perfect person when it comes to name, image, likeness, you would make Ochai Abaji. I mean, the kid has just got the $1 million smile, great personality, well liked, very recognizable, all the things you would want in an NIL sort of situation. And I mean, this is the sort of player that you're looking at here. Okay, he's fringe second round. He could get a two-way deal if he stays in the NBA draft. But in previous years, that's the way to make money. And potentially
Mhm.
that's the best option for him because he's not going to get any younger staying at Kansas. So you go and take that plunge and know that this at least is going to be able to help your family in the short term or help yourself in the short term to maximize your value. But now he comes back, and again, I'll be interested to hear from him. But that softens the blow, I think. I mean, he should, and maybe it'll happen as soon as like this week. I would think so. He should have endorsement opportunities. I can't imagine that he doesn't have endorsement opportunities just because of who he is, the celebrity status he sort of has gained at KU. And like I said, the person he is, the personality he is, it's just a perfect fit all around. The other one that comes to mind immediately, going back a couple years, was Dedrick Lawson. The same
Mhm.
sort of thing. He was an older player, didn't really seem to have the skill level to fit at the NBA level, but ended up declaring because he needed to go make money and he was getting older. And I mean, it made sense. Like he needed to go start his professional career, whether it was in the NBA or not, but he needed to go do it to go make money because at some point you got to grow up. You got to pay the bills. And I checked up on him a couple of days ago, just kind of thinking through this whole thing as well. And he's playing overseas again, probably successfully, but it does make me wonder. He was playing at an all Big 12 level. I think he was the Big 12 player of the year that year in his one season at Kansas, but it does make you wonder if he could have come back and made some of the money back just by doing endorsements and selling his likeness, those sorts of things. Maybe that would have been a more attractive thing to have happen. He could have delayed the real world for another year and still sort of gotten some of those benefits of coming back to school. So yeah, I absolutely think that this is something that probably needed to happen because you saw some of those other leagues popping up, those
Yeah.
basically those NBA draft leagues that kids going straight out of high school, and all that these things were doing were basically just competing against amateurism, which was an outdated model to begin with. So I definitely think, like I said, I'll be interested to hear a lot of these people who in the last 2 days have decided, and they make their public proclamations on Twitter or whatever, but they'll talk more extensively about it later. I
Yeah.
bet some of these guys are going to come out and basically be pretty open and say, yes, NIL was a big reason. I saw in the last week what some of my teammates could do and figured I could do the same sort of thing and make up some of that money that potentially I would have made being as a professional overseas.
Yeah, I was kind of interested because I know before this was really the hot topic, they were talking about how much money you can make in a G League and do things like that. Where now I think that this is kind of a competitive standard just because, there are a lot of opportunities with endorsements and people. I mean, we see what Mitch Lightfoot is already doing. And I just was laughing because it's like Mitch has been there for, he's a super senior. I mean, the guy is perfect, like you said, when it comes to kind of having that persona. He smiles. I just feel Mitch is going to be there for like 2 more years, going and getting endorsements, jokingly, of course. But I do think like some of those types of players it's a perfect situation because, obviously, is Mitch going to get drafted? No, but he's going to be able to stay at KU. for that long period of time. His last year there, he's going to make money probably off of who knows how many. I think I saw College Movers was the first one or something. But I just think that's incredible that they're getting the opportunity to do that. So I definitely just wanted to ask that because I do envision more players staying around a lot longer now, just because the endorsements and things will be involved. And I think some will take school a little bit more seriously and stay in there a lot longer to get those degrees. So I thought it was pretty cool. Um, but now I want to switch sports and I want to start talking football. Lance Leipold is named the head coach of KU after obviously the situation with Les Miles. When you first heard that announcement, I guess let me back it up. When you heard that he was in the running, were you excited for that? And like, what were your thoughts before they actually made the announcement?
Um, well, again, you're covering this thing and you're trying to just get as much information as possible. From the beginning, I had heard Leipold would be interested in the job, and it's sort of fascinating that I don't know. I don't know that anybody would pick this timing because of the awkwardness of what spring ball was and getting a team now after spring ball and taking over and having to let go of assistant coaches that now basically have nowhere they can go to, and then bringing in assistant coaches and leaving, at a strange time period of the year, not only for them, but for their families, trying to finish up school, all those sorts of things. But did KU benefit from being the only show in town? Basically, I think they probably did. I mean, if you wanted a Power Five job, KU wasn't competing against the other three random schools that were out there. They were competing against nobody. If you wanted that job, Kansas was the only show in town. And throughout the process, again, it seemed like, man, Lightbold, if he's interested and is going to be there at the end, then KU would be crazy not to talk to him and at least not pursue him. And seemed the same way for Munkin of Army, just because of kind of the resume that both those guys had. Now, backing up a little bit, I think Les Miles does deserve some credit for this, and in a small way, Jeff Long as well, just because the program has really suffered in the past getting good coaches, I think, because everybody understood how much of a rebuild it was because the roster scholarship situation was a disaster. Les Miles came in, and the most important thing he did was 2 straight recruiting classes, brought in all freshman players that were pretty talented. And so the roster situation, you add that to COVID where people, get an extra year of eligibility. The roster situation was not a dumpster fire like it was for many of the previous coaching hires. So it allowed KU to probably step up a little bit its pool of candidates to try to go out there and get somebody. So in the end, I mean, it sure seems like when it got to the very, very end, it was Munkin or Leipold, and both of those guys were taken to the very end. And I think KU, sort of like if you're shopping for houses, they always tell you not to get too tied to one. I think that they took both of those guys down to the wire to kind of see how things would come untangled, and Leipold was the choice in the end. So listen, I'm sure we'll get to this, but this year's going to be difficult. I mean, they had no spring ball with the guys. The first time they get them in pads is going to be August to try to implement a system, get players to know it, understand it, read and react. It's going to be really tough. I mean, there's a reason the over under win total in Vegas is 1 or 1.5. It's because this is a year zero type season for Kansas. But I do think that there's reason to be optimistic in the future, and potentially because of all those roster things we talked about, year 2, year 3, year 4, I mean, that could look a lot better for Lance Leipold than it did for many of his predecessors. So I think there's reason for optimism in Lawrence, but I'm not sure that optimism should immediately come in 2021. Just, again, mostly based off the circumstances. This is one of the latest outside coaching hires that has ever been made in college football.
For sure. And that kind of led me to my personal breakdown, because I think that we've seen these array of different coaches come in of all different like statures. I mean, we get Les Miles. Just the people we've had previously. I mean, there's a long list. And I think that from my own perspective, coming in, one of the first things I want to see him establish is just a culture. People, it tends, when you look at least for some of these coaches that have been here, we tend to lose the recruits that we should be getting, obviously, to K-State and to other schools that are local. And it's like we're just not getting that homegrown talent. So I would like to see the culture developed enough to where kids and athletes of football are like, I want to play at Kansas. Would you agree that that is number one that should be established? Or do you think that maybe they need to approach like the environment where you're talking about stadium renovations and creating that hype around what a generational kid like this, where everything's like tech, the new tech and the new cool stuff. Or do you think they just really need to create such a culture where kids want to come and play for KU football?
Well, I think a lot of what you're talking about is chicken or the egg, right? I mean, it's which one develops first so that the other one can hatch.
Yeah.
And did a big story about a month ago on Jake Schoonover, who's KU special teams coach. He's the guy that has a lot of local recruiting ties, has talked about the importance of doing that. And I know KU's coaching staff has started up Zoom calls with coaches in the Kansas, Missouri area, trying to do outreach there and make up for some lost relationships. So obviously that's something that's important. Having said that, I just mentioned Les Miles and the successful recruiting he had to an extent, but every coaching staff's gonna be a little bit different with sort of the ties that they have and where they pull their talent. Obviously Kansas had some success with Emmett Jones in the Dallas Metroplex. Got some ties to Arkansas when Brent Dearman was the offensive coordinator. Even pulled some guys on the East Coast. Karan Prunty out of basically nowhere. So I mean, there's players around, and I do think the local recruiting angle is something that KU's most successful teams have had. If you can build something where half your roster understands what it means to play for Kansas and what it means to play against Kansas State and what it means, all those things, all those ties in, you're going to get greater buy-in with the program. So I think that's an important piece, but it doesn't have to be necessarily the only piece. As far as the stadium goes, again, I think you're talking chicken and egg here.
Yeah.
To raise those sorts of funds, you got to win. You got to raise money. You got to get people excited again. And zero win seasons aren't going to do it. I mean, they just aren't. And it's at a point where KU has some big money donors, but those big money donors have been asked for a lot of money lately. I mean,
Yeah.
they've had to buy out ads and coaches, and then ads and coaches. So that's the sort of thing that needs to be built back up. And obviously, KU's coming off a pandemic year as well, where the revenues were much lower than they anticipated based off stuff outside their control. So this is kind of seen more as a build it back year rather than one where you're going to just raise a bunch of funds to completely overhaul your program. So again, a little bit all of the above. Early on, this coaching staff seems to have some nice ties to Michigan. You've seen that with some of the recent recruits that they brought in. So that might be ties that they continue. It's something, kind of a pipeline they used at Buffalo pretty effectively, and could be one that serves them well here at Kansas too. But I think you kind of take a combination of all of the above and mix it together. And that's the hope for Lance Leipold, is that you don't punt on things that you shouldn't be punting on, but yet you have your recruiting strengths. And so there are going to be areas of the country that they've established relationships, and then they're going to be able to pull some fruitful guys out of. And the hope is you build it after year 0 to year 1 to year 2. And then all of a sudden, if you're making a bowl game year 2, 3, 4, then you have a fan base excited. Then you're selling tickets. Then you have donors pumped up. Then people think Lance Leipold's a real deal. Then you start talking to donors about revamping the stadium and making some big time improvements. But again, you gotta crawl before you walk before you run, and KU's definitely at the crawling stage right now.
And that's I think because you're seeing a little bit more attention. I did a video when Lance was announced as the head coach, and then today, I think it was today, Pro Football Focus put out, and Lance Leipold comes in like the top 10 of college football coaches. Somebody is seeing something, or they're excited about something for him to be put into a category like that. He is there just that much excitement because he's taking over, like you said, a ground zero program, and they saw what he was able to do at Buffalo? Or is there really something that is brewing there where he's getting some of these Buffalo transfers coming in? We're seeing Jeremy Webb coming in, Cornell Willer is coming in. Is this football roster kind of developing a little bit quicker, and that's what they're excited about? Or are they just excited because it's Lance Leipold?
Well, Seth Galina, the guy who wrote this list for Pro Football Focus, he's really big into the X's and O's. He also kind of made a caveat on the list to basically say he wanted to be sure to kind of amplify some of the guys that might be overlooked and some of the guys that, might not immediately register for that. So I think what that tells you is obviously it speaks to Lance Leipold's record. I mean, Wisconsin Whitewater, they went 109-6.
Yeah.
It's tough to do that against anybody. I know it's Division III, but that program has not been as good since he left. So obviously he did something right there. Takes over the Buffalo program that basically has not had success over the course of its history and made multiple bowl games. Again, built that thing up from the ground level. Very much a similar challenge what he faces at Kansas, only this is Power Five in the Big 12. So I also think, again, with Seth and seeing his work online a lot, I think it would have to go to the X's and O's as well, and being a fan of what Lance Leipold does. And there's some more complicated things that we could sort of talk about and get into. But one thing that he's known for, and the offensive line coach Scott Fuchs is known for, is this wide zone running scheme, which is something that many teams out there run. But Buffalo led the nation in rushing yards per carry. So they're doing something right. And I know a lot of people really got excited with Monken potentially, running the option offense at Kansas, doing something totally different than other schools out there. The problem with that was that Monken, I think, in interviews had basically said that he wouldn't run the option offense at Kansas. It probably wouldn't work. So maybe that wasn't the great vision that many people thought it would be anyway. But this wide zone could be something. Not many people out there run it. It's sort of an execution based thing. It's something that other defenses will have to prepare for. I think only one team in the Big 12, I think it's Baylor, is starting to run it now. But again, something that is not as commonplace as the run and gun or the chuck and duck as many other Big 12 teams do. So that's sort of the hope here, isn't it? I mean, the hope is that this stuff works at D3. This stuff works in the MAC, and this stuff is going to work in the Big 12 too. And you mentioned culture earlier. I think it's going to be important for Lance Leipold, but you've seen some of it already. I mean, Kansas took a lot of the Buffalo transfers that came over, including Nowitzki, who's that center who was fourth in Pro Football Focus's center rankings nationally last year. So the fact you're seeing some guys that could have gone elsewhere say, I trust in this coaching staff. I believe in this coaching staff. I liked playing for this coaching staff. I think it tells you a little bit of something about what they're trying to build. And that's a place that you want to be a part of. And once you're a part of, you don't want to leave. So that's the grand vision for Kansas. That doesn't mean that maybe all these Buffalo transfers are going to pan out. They probably all won't. I'm here to tell you. But the fact that one of the top guys that was available did want to join Lance Leipold at Kansas, I think that's the sort of thing that he's trying to build.
That's awesome. Yeah, and that's definitely was going to be my next question. I know that he's coming to a school where I don't honestly feel like there was ever really an identity of what they wanted to execute. And so that's going to be nice to at least know that there is an identity and we can see that vision start to play out. And I do think that's pretty cool that, not a lot of teams run this style. And, I'm excited for the defense. Obviously we have one of the top cornerbacks leave our school, turns around, and we go out and get another one. What are your thoughts on this defense? Could we expect something kind of? I mean, we obviously know what the Big 12 provides. I mean, you're going to be talking about some air attacks. You're talking about some high-powered offenses. What are we kind of expecting from this defense?
Yeah, well, I mean, unfortunately for Kansas, the transfer portal hit them as you probably expect after a coaching change. And that's why it was so important, I think, for Travis Goff, the athletic director, to do what he did, which was focus on the long-term, 4 or 5 years down the line thoughts of this, and not just on the immediate term, what is going to keep certain guys on campus. I mean, that's a short-term way of thinking. For these decisions, you have to have a long-term way of thinking. So for Katie to lose Karan Prunty, Marcus Harris, Dejon Terry, I mean, that's at least the 2 best players on the roster, maybe 3 of the top ones on the roster, especially with what those guys showed in the spring game. Those are losses. And again, some of these Buffalo transfers, Kay's going to have a really tiny class in 2022 when it comes to recruiting. So I think some of that's planned just because the transfer portal allows you to have players come immediately. And then it's really tough to catch up in recruiting because all the other schools out there have been recruiting guys for 2 years and you haven't. So I think some of this was sort of planned with Kansas, but there's some question marks defensively, and there's a lot that they are going to have to make up for with the losses that they have. I mean, at cornerback, they're pretty thin now compared to what they were. Obviously, there's a couple safeties like Kenny Logan that come back with some experience. Defensive line was going to be the strength of the team, no questions, after the spring game. But now how that shakes out is a little bit different. I mean, they brought in some transfers like an Eddie Wilson from Buffalo that should help. But again, how quickly does that all come together is a question mark. And to be completely honest with you, like linebacker was the weakness of the entire team coming in already. They just signed Cornell Wheeler of Michigan, a former 4-star recruit, didn't play last year. So that seems like a positive. I would be shocked if he doesn't come in and start right away, because that's the sort of guy you bring in and start right away, especially with the lack of other options KU has at that position. But not only that, you're transitioning from a 3-4 to a 4-3, which is a different scheme. And defensive coordinator Borland wants to basically simplify things for guys so they can play a little bit faster and rally to the ball. It's just all going to take time. I mean, I hate to sound like that and to kind of repeat the broken record, but it really opened my eyes last year when KU didn't get spring ball because of COVID and Coastal Carolina did. And those two teams played each other and KU was down 35-0 within like 16 minutes. I mean, they looked like two completely different level teams. And I think not all of it was that preparation, but it seemed like a lot of it was. And so to think that Kansas has to do that for a second straight year, basically, they got spring practices, but not with the current coaching staff and not with the scheme that they're going to run. I'm not inside practices. I'm not going to be in those meetings, but I just can imagine how difficult that's going to be. So raising any expectations at this point, I think would probably be a step too far, but it's, I guess, who wrote the lyric? If you don't expect too much from me, you may not be let down. That's probably Kansas football for 2021 is don't expect too much and you probably won't get let down.
Well, I was excited to see how you answered that because I want to see your response on this. I'm projecting the Kansas Jayhawks football program to go 6-6. How crazy am I, Jesse?
You are drinking the crimson and blue Kool-Aid. You are definitely there. I was talking about this today with somebody. I was trying to think of what odds you could get for KU to go to a bowl game, and I would think it would at least be in the hundreds to 1 odds. So I think you're taking a 1% type of thought there. But no, I mean, listen, I've covered Kansas a long time. They haven't won 3 games since 2000, more than 3 games since 2009. Again, lots of optimism about the coaching staff, and I think fans should be optimistic about the coaching staff. I don't want to put a wet blanket on that because this does seem like the best resume, most accomplished coach that KU has hired since they had Mark Mangino or Glenn Mason before that. So all those things are positive. I'm just more looking at the reality of what 2021 is. And you also have to add in the fact that I saw one measure out there that KU has the second toughest schedule in the nation. I mean, this would have been a great year to have, FB or FCS school at home, and then like the worst of the Power 5 schools at home, and then the worst of the non-Power 5 schools at home. And that's just not the way the schedule plays out this year, having to play at Duke, at Coastal Carolina, and then obviously the opener against South Dakota, which is the one game where KU is going to be least prepared than any other team in the nation based off the circumstances I just talked about. So 6 is ambitious. Maybe you can talk yourself into the bottom of the Big 12 not being as good, but trying to talk yourself into Kansas being that good, especially with the questions they have on defense and especially at the quarterback position as well, that's probably a bridge too far for me to cross.
Well, I hope when the football season starts, and if they do get off to a hot start, we can meet up again and definitely have that conversation. But I'm just super excited about KU football. I'm excited, I think, just because we can sense the direction of positivity. We can at least see why they hired Lance and what the direction they at least want to take it in. And like you said, hopefully down the road that leads to, the stadium being revamped and we really start to see a program developed. I just hope that as this happens, because he is rejuvenating a KU football team, a bigger school doesn't come and just pluck him away. And that's, that'd be always one of my biggest concerns, is just that they finally have some success and he ends up going somewhere else. But I'm excited. 6-6 might be a little too much, but I'm just excited to see what he ends up doing. Jesse,
go
ahead.
Let me also say this: if KU has a good enough football coach to be plucked away, it will be the best problem they've had in the last 12 years. So, and listen, I've talked with Lance Leipold, since he's gotten a job here. I don't think that's the thing you have to worry about. I mean, I think he's getting up there and he's done this before to place. He understands what it takes to turn around a place and the consistency. And I don't, if he was 31 and some young gunner and, looking around already, I mean, potentially could happen. But like I said, if you win at Kansas enough to get a different job, then Kansas is going to hire a coach after you that is better than the one that they hired before. So all those things would be a major positive. Obviously, the last 4 hires have not worked out like that for Kansas. Have any of the, I guess only Turner Gill, is he the only one that became a head coach after he left Kansas? I think that's right, because Charlie Weiss, David Beatty, and then Les Miles. So again, that would be a great problem for Kansas to have.
For sure. Well, Jesse, I appreciate you coming on. This was tremendous, and for trying to really create a YouTube and kind of create this type of floor plan and content to people, it's very much appreciated, because I know that they're out there and they want to at least watch this content. So, I figured I'd seek out Jesse Newell and see if he wanted to come on the channel. So I can't thank you enough, even just talking this. I hope that we can get you back on the channel to talk way more down the road as we continue to dive into the athletics taking off for KU. So again, I appreciate your time, and if you want to give the people your social, like where they can find you on Twitter and things like that, one more time.
Yep, Jesse Newell, and then kansascity.com. And like I said, hit me up for a sports pass so you don't pay full price. Be sure to ask me about that. But I appreciate you having me, and yeah, we'll see how things turn out this next season.
Awesome. As you guys know how I wrap this up, as always, I appreciate you checking out the Beat of KC, and have a good day.